Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Barracks Emperors. This is another design from Brad Johnson and Ray Farrell. They are the designers of Time of Crisis, and this game is published by GMT. I do receive review copies from GMT pretty regularly, but I bought this one with my own money. Alright, so here is a solo setup for Barracks Emperors, but I want to give you a general overview of both the solo mode and kind of what's different from multiplayer mode, because there is quite a bit different. Both games are played across 3 rounds. And both games involve kind of an interesting spatial puzzle that is about trick taking, but all the tricks are available at the same time. So in multiplayer, you're trying to get the most points by basically getting to claim the most of these Emperor cards that are out here on the board. So and the way that you're going to do that is you'll notice everybody's on a grid. These are Emperor spaces with a laurel crown inside of them. And if you look at an Emperor card, they each have 4 different symbols, one on each side. So you'll have pillar, wreath, sword, and eagle. And essentially in a 4-player game, one person represents each of those symbols, and they will always play to their side of one of the cards. But what makes that interesting is, like, let's say that I want to get Licinianus, and I put a really great card here. That great card is also going to benefit the pillar player on this side when they're trying to get Saturninus. So by having all the tricks out and available at the same time and turning them into kind of a spatial puzzle, you're also putting yourself in a situation where every card you play impacts other players as well. Sometimes for good and sometimes for ill. And then you essentially win the trick by having either the highest trump, so you've got red, yellow, and blue suits to play with, or just the highest card if there are no trump cards. And then there's some rules where cards of the same value cancel each other out, but I don't want to get too deep into the teach. I just want to give you the overall flavor. So in the multiplayer game, everybody's just vying for these cards, and you're doing it by playing your cards out on the board and wherever you play them. So if I take this 6, this mobile Wolgus, and I play it here, that is a 6 for me here as the sword player, but it's also a 6 here for the pillar player and a 6 here for the eagle player. So it's something you definitely want to watch out for. These cards are also fun because they're both numbers, and then some of them have special actions printed on them. So learning how to use the actions is as important as getting good numbers. So in the solo game, what happens is that you are the Emperor. You are defending fortified Roma against barbarian incursions. And meanwhile, other rival claimants to the throne are fighting you for tricks out here on this board using a simple AI. So barbarians play a different role in the multiplayer game, so make sure that you check on that if you want to play this game multiplayer. But in the solo game, there are barbarian cards kind of laced throughout this draw deck, and there's a different number of barbarian cards per round depending on the difficulty level that you're playing. Every turn when you play cards, you're also going to pull cards from the forum to add to your hand. So this is a rotating market. And then as you pull cards to fill that market, some of them are going to be barbarians. And as they come out, they are going to start basically on whatever player's turn it is when they arrive. So you're the sword player, but the eagle, pillar, and crown players are also going to get chances to put out cards based on the AI rules. Whatever player happens to be up, the active player at the time that you pull barbarian out of this deck, will be the one whose side of the board is where their homeland originates. So let's say that it is the wreath player's turn, and we draw a barbarian. That barbarian's going to start here in the homeland space. And then as we draw other barbarians, regardless of whose turn it is, those barbarians will go either here or here. Then they're going to come here, and then they're going to enter Rome. And the first time a barbarian enters Rome, you just flip it one time, but then if it's placed here again, then the game immediately ends. And in addition to fighting for tricks against your AI rivals, you as the Emperor who's responsible for everything, you have to figure out ways to deal with the barbarians. So you can spend military cards in combination with populist cards, which represent a militia, to get rid of barbarians. The other thing you can do is you can choose to offer them citizenship, but what that costs you is basically retail space in the forum. So I could take this barbarian and put him here, but that would mean that there were only ever 3 cards available in the forum from that point on. So this is a game where you are making sacrifices to make sure that Rome stays safe. And then meanwhile, you're also fighting for those tricks against an AI. And there are 3 simulated opponents you have to deal with. And for the rival turn, I'm sure somebody on BGG has or will make some sort of player aid so you can just print out. But for now, it's in the rules. There is a rival turn, and it says during each rival's turn, perform the following steps. So you draw a card from the draw deck, which is how a barbarian may enter on a rival's turn. But no matter what the card is, you're going to place it and resolve it. And so if it is just a normal card with a number on it that you're going to play, the AI ignores the text on the card, but there are basically a little lists of criteria that will help you figure out where to put the card. So the way that'll work is you have selection criteria in the rulebook. So it'll always place in a legal space where it's immediately going to win an emperor. It's always going to do that. It'll finish off a trick and win anytime. After that, it'll basically try to place in ways that will put it ahead in the horse race towards winning a trick. And there are just a few criteria that will bring it there, and they've put you kind of in the order in which the AI should think. And then worst case scenario, you put it in any legal space because they do have to play. And then if you have a situation where there are multiple spaces where you could place that card, you also have just a little bit of a priority list here. So basically, it's not going to let you win an emperor. So even if it can win an emperor, it's not going to help you out if it's at all possible to avoid that. It will avoid helping its rivals, but you suck the most, so it'll go for you first. Or it'll go for tricks that it's kind of on the way to winning. But ultimately, if none of these things apply, then it will be your choice. If it comes to that, choose wisely and selfishly. So that's just meant to be a very quick overview of the solo mode. Again, essentially in multiplayer, everybody's playing for all these tricks at the same time, and they're just all available on the board, and everybody would just be playing cards from their hand to make that happen. If you're playing solo, there are AI rules to help you place cards against yourself to represent the other rival factions. But in order to complicate it, because it's not really that fun to play just a pure trick-taking game against an automated opponent, there are also different rules for the barbarians, where instead of just kind of coming out on the board and blocking things and blocking other people's cards, as in multiplayer, they are actively moving to invade Rome. And you'd better watch out. And it's something extra for you to handle while you're also trying to score points by winning tricks. So with all that said, that's just my quick overview of Barracks Emperor's solo mode. Let's go ahead and have some final thoughts. All right, so now for some final thoughts. What did I think of Barracks Emperors? That's actually a really interesting question. This is a really interesting game to talk about. So I will say, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in Barracks Emperors, and I think that it's probably a lot better as a multiplayer game. Solo wasn't bad, but for a trick taker, I felt like it wasn't necessarily that much fun to make decisions for the AI, because the whole point of trick taking is looking at other people and wondering what they have and what they're planning. And so solo worked and it was okay, but I didn't necessarily think that it was as delightful as other solo modes that are out in the world. I did like that they took thought to the fact that you're not playing against a human, and added the barbarian mechanism where they're encroaching on Rome and you have to deal with a whole bunch of different problems as the emperor. But I'd really rather just play straight up Barracks Emperors, and you can't really do that by yourself. That said, I do think that multiplayer is going to be really great. I've only gotten to play it one time with other people. I absolutely loved it. It was really fun. I liked having all the tricks out at the same time. It was a really messy spatial puzzle, and it was just tough, but in a really, really good way. So I can absolutely see Barracks Emperors being great for people who have a game night regularly and who like trick takers. So maybe for solo, it's not amazing, but for multiplayer, this has got a lot of potential. And that actually leads to kind of an interesting, set of comments about Barracks Emperors and maybe how it's marketed. The thing that's interesting about specific types of art and specific game publishers is that you develop expectations based on who is publishing something and what it looks like. So I love Time of Crisis because I thought it was a really interesting attempt to recreate some of the chaos of the later Roman Empire when you got a whole bunch of different emperors and pretenders and just messes on the borders. And so Time of Crisis appealed to me, not because it was perfectly historical, but because I thought it was evocative of something very historical. I just did a P500 pre-order immediately without really looking at what the game's about because I liked the designers, I liked Time of Crisis, the title Barracks Emperors, and the cover with, the Roman army guys really got me excited thinking, we're going to do another game that's about this underutilized period in Roman history. I'm really, really excited. So, when the game came and I realized it was a trick taker, I wasn't upset exactly, but I wasn't going into what I expected because I was hoping for something that was historical commentary. And instead, I got something that really, I think you could have themed this game a number of different ways and still had the same trick-taking concept happening out on that big board. So in that sense, I think the game might not have been a perfect match for GMT, or at least for the way that they market games. Because, I mean, I picked it up assuming that it was a historical game, and I think a lot of GMT customers just grab stuff for that same reason. But this is actually a game that I think has a more wide popular audience than the GMT marketing arm is going to give it. So, the Barracks Emperors looks a bit dry, and it looks like a war game, but if you have a game night where you've got people who love card games and who like to do trick taking and who like the crew and you know, basically anything like that, then actually that's the group of people that is really, really, really going to love the Barracks Emperors. The Barracks Emperors has historical information on the cards, but it's really not a serious engagement with history. What Barracks Emperors is a very fun engagement with trick taking done in a new way, where you have to be paying attention to the cards on the grid. And you have to be really smart about how you place things, watching what other people do, being careful about what you're leaving yourself open for, and then dealing with the barbarians as they come out in the multiplayer version of the game. So basically, you know, this is a really short review, but to sum up, you know, Barracks Emperors is not grippy in the way that a historical game is grippy. Like, I don't really have a lot to say about it in the sense of whether it's about Rome or how it represents Rome, because it really doesn't. What this is a very, very smart trick taker with an okay solo mode, but that has huge potential with groups. And I actually wish that it had been marketed differently, because I think that if it had a different theme and if it was from a different publisher, this is the sort of thing that would be like a hot game of Essen, or that, you know, you'd see on Instagram everywhere, because I really think a lot of regular old gamers who don't necessarily come within 10 feet of a war game would really, really love this game. So that's really all I have to say about the Barracks Emperors. I enjoyed my experience with it. It's probably not a keeper for me just because I don't play group games enough, but I actually think it's a wonderful game for people who love trick takers, who love puzzly little grids, and who love to, you know, plan where they're going to put their cards and really try to hedge their bets. So if that's you, and you normally don't like this kind of game, and you're watching my channel for my more mainstream stuff, Barracks Emperors actually is probably for you. If you're here for a crunchy war game, then Barracks Emperors is not it, and you should go somewhere else or just play Time of Crisis. So that about sums up the Barracks Emperors. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, ask questions, maybe support me on Patreon, and most of all, happy gaming.